Let me start out again and say good morning. If you're on the call, if you can hear me, if you can see me, could you please indicate that in the chat so that at least we can tell? Um, we can. Good, good. Thank you. All right. Well, first of all, let me start out by apologizing for the challenge that has been going on for the last 20 minutes now. That is part of the reason why we need to have calls like this. Unfortunately, our primary host or um, our, our convener is back in Nigeria. And so they are having some connection challenges with the networks and other things. And so they had to basically transfer some responsibilities over here just for us to get the ball rolling while they try to sort that out. So sincere apologies to everyone that is watching, and we will try to make the best of this time. Hopefully they will join us very shortly. I wasn't planning on being on this call for more than 20, 30 minutes at the most, but we've got to improvise as we go. All right, so while we're waiting for that to get sorted out, my name is Dala Alphonso. I am a Nigerian, born and raised, spent the first half of my life, actually, believe it or not, in Nigeria, but I live in the United States, specifically in Omaha, Nebraska. And I am all African, just like you. The fact that I've lived in America for the last few decades does not change anything. So let's talk this morning. The more I thought about this topic, the more I realized that what we need this morning is more of a conversation than a tutorial or a lecture. And what do I mean by that? We, as Africans, we have a lot of, we attend a lot of seminars, we attend a lot of programs, we attend a lot of trainings. But at the end of the day, what do we do with it? And so on this topic today, Africa Beyond Oil, the binary option, I want to talk to you about three things. And really, I hope that it is not a talk. I hope it will be a heart-to-heart, because that is really where we need to connect. And I will probably share some of my frustrations with you, some of my aspirations with you, in the hope that somebody who is out here on this call would get it. Now, what am I talking about? I will talk to you about three things. And these three questions are things that I want you to think about because they border around the most important elements that you must pay attention to. Number one, question number one, and please, if you're on this call, however way you're connected, please write this down because you need to get this. Question number one, who are you? I know I want to talk about e-commerce and all of that, but I'm a very, very first principles thinking kind of person. My mind is really around what is the root question, and that's where I'd like us to start. So the first question I would like to ask you is, who are you? This is a question of identity. Why is this important? Because in order for you to become, in order for you to make a difference, in order for you to impact your world, in order for you to bring about change, the question of identity must be answered. Who are you? Do you know who you are? Well, let me give you a little bit of an example. You know, I was reading about slavery and some of the global, some of the nations around the globe where individuals took over nations, or colonization, or what you call invasions, whatever it is, whatever phrase or term you want to use, it comes down to one singular thing. It begins with getting individuals to change their identity. because your identity itself is a box. Think about it like a capsule. It contains your culture. It contains your way of thinking. It contains who you are. It embodies everything that makes you unique. It makes, and I'm seeing comments in there that says things like, I am an investor. Those are great, but who are you? It's beyond what you do, because that is a whole different question that I'm going to get to. Who are you? The question of who you are points to not only your origin, but it also talks about the question, it also addresses the question of your purpose. Because once you know who you are, it changes what environment you can function in. It changes your perception of the world. Who you are is a complete 360 for some people, if only they can answer that question. If you know who you are, when somebody talks to you, you are not moved, you're not perturbed, you're not disturbed, because all you are thinking about is, you don't know me. It's like somebody walks up to you and says, you are a criminal, or you're a thief, or you're something that you know you are not. You just smile, because no matter how frustrating, no matter how angry, no matter how the person intends to take you down, you are not moved because you know who you are. Most of you in Africa, and now in other parts of the world, thanks to Michael W. Smith, you sing the song, I know who I am. Why? Because everything that you can become is always a product of who you are. Do you know who you are? Have you sat down to ask yourself that question? You jump from project to project, seminar to seminar, conference to conference, mentor to mentor. The reason why it's not clear is because you don't know who you are. Who you are is the fundamental question that you must be able to answer before you jump into anything. If I know that I am an investor, then it means that I need mentors in investment. If I know that I am a teacher, I need mentors in that industry. If I know that I am a businessman, I need mentors within my specific domain or sphere of business influence. Who you are is a pointer to a lot of things. You must know who you are. I'll come back to that and tie it all together. The next question is more of the question of capability. Or before I even talk about capability, let me talk about the third piece. The third piece I wanted to talk about was ability. All right, but let me just flip this for just a minute. Let's talk about abilities. Why are abilities important? Because it addresses the second question. The first question is, do you know who you are? The second question is, do you know what you can do? That is a question of capability. That's a question of ability. What are those natural gifts, talents, and abilities that you already possess? What is preventing you from touching the world? What is stopping you from making a difference? A lot of times it's not just the question of identity, because the question of identity opens your eyes to see who you are, but also it reveals what you can do. Because if you know who you are, all of a sudden you realize, I am also capable of being one of the most brilliant minds that can walk upon the earth. Question, what can I do? What are my talents? What are my abilities? What are the things that I am most proficient at? What are the things that I can easily accomplish? Some of us want to be CEOs, but in reality, based on your talents, your abilities, what we call your natural efficiencies, you are probably more of an operational guy. Maybe your highest aspiration should be a COO, or maybe you're one of those financial CFO guys, but you're not one of the strategic thinking, individuals that can sit down and come up with a vision for the next 20, 30 years. Maybe that's not your space. Maybe you're more of an administrator, you're more of a doer. But because you live in an environment that is driven by identity politics or is driven by power, I like to be on top of the food chain, or it is all a title-driven society, because we Africans, we love our titles, right? But if you're not moved by all of that because you know who you are, then you will become very content at being somebody who drives operations, at being somebody who manages their finances, at being somebody who runs the technology sphere of your organization or your business. Knowing who you are, you don't necessarily have to be the CEO. You don't even have to be the CFO or the COO. You don't even have to be the CLO or the CIO. You don't even have to have any title whatsoever. But if you know who you are, at the end of the day, you will find out that the greatest value that any business, corporation, or anything needs is always driven by a function of what you can do. Knowing what your strengths are. Your strengths are always a pointer to what your deliverables can be. And once you are able to deliver, once you are able to consistently produce, it changes the dynamics of things. Thirdly, let's talk about capabilities now. Now, capabilities are different from abilities because it talks about how far you can go. How far you can go. And this is a critical element because I'm going to talk about it. Now, I don't know where this video is going to go, but I will challenge any person that sees this, hears this, or cares to talk about this to hit me up, or let's have a public debate about it. Now, if you know me very well, I'm not the kind of person who likes to be confrontational, but I've discovered that Africans have no clue about their capabilities. Because if you have an idea of what you are capable of doing, you will not depend on nations like China to come and run your resources. You will not depend on foreign nations to come and build your economy. You will not depend on entities outside of your nation to come and provide for you. As a matter of fact, if you knew your capabilities, you will not have the types of people leading you today. What am I talking about? Africans, you are one of the brightest people on earth. Look at any nation in the world, from Russia, China, the United States, and Europe. Some of the brightest minds in their colleges, in their universities, are Africans. Africans. It doesn't matter. I've lived in the United States for over 20 years. And let me tell you this, in any industry, medical, technology, business, infrastructure, architecture, mention it, including the government. Some of the pillars, the brightest minds that drive the mechanism of these entities are Africans. But the problem is, Africans do not even know who they are, do not even know what they can do, and do not know what their capabilities are that they can deliver. And so all their thinking has been brought into this myopic box where all they think about is the next meal. No wonder. All we think about in nations like Nigeria is crude oil. Let me ask you this question. I see that there are a lot of Nigerians on this call. If we took away oil from Nigeria, what would you have left? If we took away the natural resources from that nation, it tells me that we will go bankrupt in a matter of months. We're already bankrupt despite all the natural resources. What does that speak to? It speaks to a single fact, that the wealth of a nation are not its natural resources, but its human capital. The wealth of a nation are not its natural resources, but its human capital. You are, when you see think about, I can speak for a nation like Nigeria that has over 200 million people. That is 200 million minds with incredible potentials. Look at this. One human being named Mark Zuckerberg has transformed the world. Elon Musk has transformed the world. Bill Gates has transformed the world. These are single individuals that have changed their world. If we can go as far back as time can think about the Thomas Edisons, and we talk about some of the greatest people that have transformed the world, be it for good or for bad. But let me ask you a question. Without folks like Desmond Tutu and folks like Nelson Mandela and some of these individuals that we can, Thomas Sankara, and some of those African leaders that we can point to and say, this man made a difference. With the exception of those, how many African leaders since the inception of time, whenever the first nation in Africa got its independence, how many African leaders can you say that person changed our lives? 5 fingers. I will be surprised if we can be able to count up to 5. We have people who are frustrated because they can't even change their world. They can't make a difference. They're just sitting down in this box because all everybody thinks about is themselves. What can I get? Nee, is good to see you. All they can think about is themselves. What can I amass for myself? What money can I get? But nobody is ever thinking, how can I change our nation? Let me tell you this. On this call are more than enough people to rewrite the history of Africa. And that history has nothing to do with its natural resources. You are the answer to the African problem. We don't have leaders today, or I can tell you this, that we have leaders, but the leaders are not positioned to do the things that need to be done. So I just want to challenge you. You have the capability to change the world. You have the capability to change the world. And I'm going to say this now. I see a few comments in the box there, and let me address this. I know most of you want to jump into other options. If all you think about, and I'm going to say this, and I had this conversation with Uriel earlier on. If all you want to think about is how much food or how much food you can put on your table, how much money is in your bank account, how big the size of your house is, or the type of car you drive, or the aircraft you fly in, if that is your only vision, then I have news for you. You are not different from the people in office today, because that is their primary driver. You should be thinking about how you can make a difference in your world, how you can change the landscape of Africa, oil or not. Why? Because within you lies the capability to change that world. And here's the one thing I've come to discover, and I learned this lesson 25 years ago. I am 49 years old now. I learned this lesson as a 23, 24-year-old, that if I position myself as a conduit or as a pipe for water to flow through, I will never be dry. What does that tell you? It means that in order for me to remain consistently relevant, in order for me to consistently meet all of my needs, I have to have a bigger picture. That means I must learn how to change my world. I must have a clear vision, an objective. something I intend to achieve? So I will leave those three questions for you to think about. Question number one, who are you? I'm not saying, hey, my name is Mike. That's not what I'm talking about. Who are you? The question of identity. Go think about that. Question number two, what can I do? What am I capable of? What are my talents, my gifts and abilities? That will tell you what industry you're supposed to be in. That will tell you the scope that you should focus in. That will tell you what you are innate and passionate about and can deliver. Thirdly, what am I capable of delivering? What am I capable of doing? That in itself will give you the big picture. Your dream may be bigger than your city. If all you think about is putting food on your table, I understand the question of poverty is important, but if you can address the bigger picture, you will address the needs of people, you'll address the question of poverty, and you address every other thing that you need. So I'm going to leave it at that. I know you have other panelists that need to speak. I'm going to leave it at that. And if you have any questions, I will take maybe one or two questions, depending on how much time I'm allowed to have. So Uriel, or whoever the hosts are, I will yield it over to you at this time, but I will take questions if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, sir. Super appreciate you, sir. Thank you. Finally, with all the network issues, I'm able to get on. Thank you so much, sir. Great impact, great insights. We're grateful. Thank you. Now, please, if you have any question, just raise your hand or type it on the chat box so that our doctor can quickly address that. You have a question, you can type it on the chat box for doctor to address that. How do we find out who you are?
Okay.
So somebody wants to know how to find out who you are.
I would take that question real quick. How do you find out who you are? A lot of times and let me say this from my point of view, we are driven by what we see. We're driven by what we see, and let me explain what I mean by that. When most of us begin to try to answer the question of identity, we always look around us for something that we admire. That is one of the elements, but it's not the primary element. Your environment oftentimes is a reflection of the picture that you want to be. Let me use this analogy. When think about a small fish, think about yourself as a tilapia. Tilapia is indigenous to the African area. So think of yourself as a catfish, as a tilapia in the water, right? And this tilapia is swimming around and watching, and then it always sees these sharks or whales or dolphins passing around with so much majesty. And so what happens is that tilapia all of a sudden wants to become a dolphin or a cat or a whale or a shark or something. What do I mean by that? Let me break it down. Most Africans want to be pastors. Do you know why you want to be a pastor? It's not because you're called to be a pastor or if you're a gifted speaker. It's simply because that is your only picture of success. That is what you see. That is the only person within your purview that has the things that you want. So all of a sudden, that becomes who you want to be. But is that who you are? Some of us, because we're impoverished and in a very difficult situation, what we think about is, how can I get more money? And so all of a sudden, when I see a person that has some money, I'm limitless, we're getting some echo from you. Once we know who that person is, once we know we identify who that individual is, all of a sudden, that person who is able to pay their bills or live in a nice house becomes our model of who we want to be. Now, is that the best way to go about things? No. Here are a few questions you can ask yourself to know who you are. or who you should be. Number one, what am I good at? What do I love to do? Uriel, I think I'm limitless, whoever that person is. I see a ceiling fan rotating. That's where the sound is coming from. Not you, it's the other one, Uriel.
What name did you use to download this?
Okay, so sorry, I usually a lot of things. I like staying focused.
What name did you use to download this? Did you put name? So how would I?
Thank you. I apologize about that. That's the beauty of working in this space. All right, so think about it. So at the end of the day, there are certain things that should drive your decision to identify who you are. Question number one, what do I love to do? I ask people the same question, and I want you to think about it. If there is something that I can do, that money, that is finance, fame, fortune, is not a factor, and I will be content doing it for the rest of my life, knowing that everybody is paid the same amount, what will that thing be? It's something worth thinking about. If I can be a speaker, a public speaker, and make $1 million a year, if I can be a school teacher and make $1 million a year, if I can be a president and make $1 million a year, if I can be a speaker and have global popularity, a teacher with global popularity, the president with global popularity. If I can be anything in life, I have the same level of finances, the same level of exposure, the same level of fame, the same level of everything. What will I be doing? That is a pointer to what you should do. Why? Because passion is the birthplace for creativity. When you find yourself in the center of the circumference of who you are, which is where your passion, your creativity begins to ooze, all those things that we're striving to get begin to come naturally. So it is important for you to identify something you are passionate about. When you look at the world in your purview, what do you see? A lot of the times it's our environment that tells us who we are. But the fact of the matter is that external influences cannot tell you who you are. You've got to look inside of you. How do I operate? What am I good at? What angers me? What kind of problems do I love to solve? What am I excellent at doing? What am I creatively ingenious at developing or delivering? Those are all things that point internally to help me shape what I want to do. Some of you want to get into real estate, but you don't know anything about the market. You're not passionate about buildings or selling houses. What are you doing there? You're driven by poverty and your environment. Some of you want to preach, but you cannot even sit down and study. You've not been called. You've not gotten the right education. But more importantly, you're not even passionate about seeing souls saved. You're not a great public speaker, but you want to do public speaking because you think that's the next thing. No. Be content being a tilapia. Because you're awesome, you will end up in somebody's pot someday. That is your destiny. Be proud of it. Be great at it. Love what you do. So I will strongly encourage you, what I will say, it's in 5 minutes, you cannot get everything that you need to know. I will encourage you to go read books on topics about this. Go read books that will help you identify who you are. Self-identification is the key. Now, you have to remember something, and I think somebody asked this question, and I'm going to say this right now. What is going on in Africa? I see about almost 400 people on this call, and I'm going to say something. If you don't rise up and take over your continent, the Chinese will run you into the ground. They know who they are. They know what they can do. They know what they're capable of doing. Let me share a little secret with you. I was speaking a few days ago to a friend of mine who's Chinese. And he said something. He brought a video to my attention that was being shared. And that video was a Chinese organization setting up a school or schools in Africa and teaching them Chinese. Do you know the intention of that? It's to eradicate your identity. Because part of your identity is your language. Part of your identity is your culture. So when a nation comes to take over, the first thing they do is to impose their identity. Their identity are the signs that give you direction. They go as far. This individual shared a story with me because he was from a part of the world that is under China today. He said, when they came about 100 years ago, one of the first things they did was teach us their language. And he said, today, you cannot even use your native name. You have to use the Chinese name. He said, their vision is global dominance. And we have leaders in Africa that have pretty much opened the door to bring these people in because we don't know who we are. To eradicate our identity, take over our schools, take over our infrastructure, take over our economy. As soon as they're able to take over your entire nation economy, but more importantly, beginning with your identity, you will have nothing left. And at the rate which Africa and African leaders are selling you out, mark my words, today is the 23rd day of May, 2020. If you don't do something about it, 20 years from now, mark my word, you will be speaking Chinese in your nation. You will be under a Chinese government because they would make up over 60% of your economy and your government and your top cadre of leadership. You will find yourself at the bottom of the food chain. Africans, oil is not your greatest infrastructure. Your mind is the most powerful tool that the earth can ever have. Just recently, I watched a video where in Zambia, Africans are referred to as foreigners and not permitted to enter into a Chinese restaurant in their own land. There are parts of Africa that the Chinese have already colonized, and Africans are not even permitted to go in. In Nigeria recently, they brought construction workers under the guise of doctors and were received by your federal government. And today, nobody can account for where these people are. And you're sitting down thinking you can do nothing. You don't need weapons of mass destruction. You don't need 1 million people, $1 billion. You need human capital and the intellectual mind. 400 people coming together with a common vision to transform their continent can change the world. But they must know who they are. Because when you know who you are, your interests will move from self to nation. I keep telling my friends who are in leadership that it is very important for us to begin to teach our people who they are. Back in the day, most graduates from Nigerian or African colleges today cannot even say their national anthem. That's a problem. It means that we've already begun to lose track of who we are. They can't say their pledges because they don't know who they are. Identity is strong. Who you are is strong. It is so powerful that it can keep you for generations. Part of the problem we have in nations like Nigeria is because the Igbos know who they are. The Hausas know who they are. The Yorubas know who they are. The Ijaws know who they are. So because they know who they are from an ethnic sense, they are unwilling to become a nation. If we can go past identity politics to national politics, nations like Nigeria will be the most powerful nations on earth. Forget natural resources, forget oil, that is nothing. We have minds that will create resources that are technical, that are from e-commerce, from technology, from medicine, from creative ways of doing things that have nothing to do with the earth. But it all begins from getting to know that within me lies a seed that is waiting for global expression. That is something that you need to think about. I needed to say that because my wife and I were talking about this just yesterday. I said, I'm afraid for Africa. And here's the truth. Uriel is on this call. I made a pledge in 2014 that for 5 years, I'm going to invest in Africa. 5 years. And for 5 years, I was in Nigeria almost every month. In fact, for 5 years, at my own cost, I didn't ask anything from anybody. I don't need anybody to buy me anything. I spent more time in Nigeria over the last 5 years, from 2014 to 2019. I spent most of my time just traveling around the country and building people and developing them. But that was my seed. But I look back now, and I was telling my wife this just yesterday. I said, I am afraid that if nothing happens in less than 10, 15 years, 20 years max from now, we will have nowhere to go back to as our home country. That's a fact, folks, but you can change that. I know I've well overtaken my time, Uriel. We have 3 other speakers, so.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Dr. Dala Alphonso is my mentor on personal development. He runs the Personal Transformation Network. He's devoted so much time to helping us grow in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, before I let him go, let me tell you, if you remember the Ethiopian airline that crashed, Dr. Dala Alphonso was the only survivor on that aircraft.
I wasn't the only survivor. I was one of 50 survivors. Not. 125 people died, but I was one of the few who came out without any scratch. So.
All right, sir. He was one of the few that survived that crash. All right, so that's amazing. Thank you so much, sir. We know you need to run. For the people asking about you, I'll get your information across to them. So if you want to know more about Doctor, get in touch with me. My name is Uriel Ezagu. Or get in touch with the person who sent you this link. They will let me know, and I'll put you on the talk. Thank you, appreciate you. Thank you, sir. God bless you.
All right, thanks, man. Nee, good to see you.